Okay, welcome fellow builders, and to this, a new and different episode. Today we have a guest to the channel. Welcome, Umconfortable. Did I get it right?
Close enough. Doesn't really bother me.
Welcome to the channel, Uncomfortable.
Thank you. Glad to be here. This is a strange first experience. So I'm looking forward to seeing
So,
what we get.
yeah, great. For those of you who are watching the video who don't know who Uncomfortable is, he is the maker of many amazing plots here on the Shadow Kingdom server, including this one behind us, the Cloud Beast, which is spectacular. If you haven't seen it on our regular creative videos, go check that out. But Uncomfortable has volunteered to answer a few of our questions and to give us a little bit of a tour around the plot and point out some of the more interesting points from a builder's perspective. So let's have a little look around. Was there anything you wanted to show us first, Uncomfortable?
First, all right. Let's see.
Whoa, I've lost you already. Where did you go?
Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna come back in a second. Just sort of.
It's all good. I got you. It's the grey skin on the grey background. It's not helping. Fire
Yeah,
away.
sorry about
Go
that. I'll try and stand in front of the coloured bits as much as possible. Speaking of which, I think that's sort of my favorite thing to point out is sort of the vivid colour use that I've tried to get out of this. A lot of contrasting sort of textures and with this whole sort of blue and pink contrasting with the orange. I think that's one of the more striking features of the build.
Yeah, absolutely, and not colours I would have necessarily put together myself either. Pink against orange seems like a risk, but it actually really works in this. So yeah,
it's a weird sort of bold one. Sort of, I wasn't sure about it at first, but then I sort of went for it, and yeah, I liked it. I think that's sort of something to keep in mind is not just sort of building comfortably in a way. I guess that sort of ties into my name choice here. Is that there's always a sort of a important level of uncomfortability that comes with building, I think.
Yeah, and it definitely shows. We are a long way from cobble and wood, which is where most people start and possibly even end when building in Minecraft. Yeah, I did have a few questions whilst we're having a little look around this magnificent plot that I was going to fire at you. So, first thing that I wanted to ask was, where on earth do you get the inspiration for your builds? Because they are quite fantastical.
Yeah, it's sort of just stems from a lot of art that I've seen over the years, I think. I never really base it on anything in particular. It's always just sort of firing out random shots in different directions and sort of seeing, what comes out when I'm done.
Really?
I sort of, yeah, I try to base it around a specific animal in a way at the start of it, but it just sort of evolves and devolves from there in a whole bunch of different directions. But I think taking note and looking at a lot of different artists from around the internet and in an area that you like is really important to sort of developing.
Yeah. Do you have any specific places that you kind of look for those kind of outside inspirations?
Yeah, I get a lot of mine from Twitter. I follow a lot of artists on there. I think it's a really great place to find a lot of art. But there's also websites like ArtStation, and even Instagram has a lot. Social media is a really sort of great place to find new artists and art that you might not normally see.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff that's hidden on there that a lot of people miss. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I take it it's that kind of fantasy illustration, that kind of thing, or?
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of that. So I just follow a bunch of accounts for different artists and styles. I don't have any specific examples, but
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, Reddit as well. I should mention. So I get a lot of things from there.
Yeah, I mean, if there are any specific ones that you want to recommend to others, we'll put that in the description below, perhaps after the video. So yeah, great.
For you.
So about your journey with Minecraft, then, how long have you been building in creative seriously like this?
Yeah, so building at all, I kind of started with creative at first. a long time ago, probably about 2011.
Okay,
Started
wow,
slowly
veteran.
ramping up. I don't know about veteran, but um, I think I slowly started getting a bit more serious around 2013, 2014. So still a few years ago. But
Yeah.
I'd say it was pretty on and off. Over the years, it's a bit hard to stick with it
Yeah, I
across the
mean, we,
entire
we all
time.
go through those phases of getting a little bit, yeah, saturated with Minecraft and having to go do something else. I think we've all been
Yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah.
So it's hard to sort of nail down exactly when, because I sort of think of it in periods rather than one sort of long, steady thing. But
Uh huh.
I guess around 2013, 2014 is when I really started looking at it as more than just like a simple sort of game. And if I do, to avoid sounding too pretentious about it, think that it's a great opportunity to be used as an art form.
Absolutely, yeah. And without without a question, we could describe your plots as art. That is, yeah, that's a definite. So
Well, I hope
talking
so.
talking of the plots themselves, I'm sure that a lot of the viewers are going to be eager to get some secrets as to your tips and tricks and techniques and what you do and how you do it. So, I mean, first of all, are there any particular plugins that you use here on Shadow Kingdom that you prefer? Do you stick to one? Are you dabbling in all kinds of things, or do you do everything by hand, which frankly would be insane? Please don't tell me you do everything by hand.
No, I'll tell you the complete opposite. I do practically nothing by hand. I use a gross amount of World Edit and Voxel Sniper. Usually sort of Voxel for the actual shaping of everything. I find that a lot easier to use personally
Mm,
than just the World Edit
yeah.
brushes. But
Mm,
anything like texturing, coloring, um, things like that, I'll always use World Edit because
yeah.
I'm a little bit hopeless with shaping by hand originally. So it's sort of a mix of shaping with voxel and then going over lightly brushing little bits that stick out by hand, and then adding all the texture and everything like that with World Edit after.
Okay, so do you kind of get a fairly well formed um, shape to the build before you start putting any real color on?
Yeah, it's when you do things out of order and you start sort of shaping and then doing texturing and then shaping again and smoothing, it really risks messing up your work and making your whole piece look a bit messy and out of sorts. So I tend to do all my shaping first and get a pretty solid idea of what I'm going to do, um, and then go in and make all the decorative changes.
Yeah.
Um, Generally in a few sort of passes. So I'll do my first general shape, then I might um, add like a basic, like just one or two colors, so it's easy enough to change back to stone or whatever I'm building as a base. Um, then if I don't like it, I'll go through and undo and change the shape of a jaw or add a horn where there wasn't one previously
Hmm.
um, or that first, just to sort of get a more solid shape before I start getting to the nitty gritty little details that I don't want to have to redo if I've erased it all.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah. So, I mean, how did you learn? Where did you get these skills? Are these all self-taught? Have there been any people or places that you found a good help for getting to this level of skill with Minecraft?
A lot of it, I would say, is pretty self-taught in terms of just spent way too much time on here trying to just create weird and wacky shapes. But a lot of it comes down to sort of analyzing builds and creations made by others that I've seen, either on Shadow Kingdom or on other servers or just elsewhere on the internet. Um, I think it really is an important skill to be able to look at a build and analyze, how they've created the certain shapes they've created, try and figure out what tools they've worked with, sort of try and reverse engineer what they've done. I think it's really important to remember to do because you can learn on your own. You can learn just through working, but I think there's a great deal of help that comes from looking at the work of others and discussing with others and sharing ideas. Because
Yeah.
there's people on here like Ultra Brain and like a Builder and a few others that have done organics and other structural work over the years that I think we all sort of bond together in a way and say, hey, I'm just trying this out and this is working pretty well, or in this technique, maybe if you try this other thing differently here. It's really important to get feedback from other people and then not just positive feedback all the time.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah,
you occasionally
definitely.
need someone to say, yeah, someone to just say, oh, I'm not sure that this is working quite so well, or maybe if you did this instead. I think that's
Yeah, I mean that for me
pretty
that's
cool.
the strength of the community here on Shadow Kingdom. I, whilst I can't claim to be anything like the builder you are, I've certainly improved no end from the help of other builders on here. It's a fantastic place to come and learn. So yeah, fantastic. Do you want to? I know we said this at the beginning. We never quite did it because we got straight into the questions. But can you talk us through some of the little things on this plot of how you did them? One thing, and I know this sounds like the most ridiculous detail to ask about, but the undulations of this orange water. What's your technique for that?
Right. So with this one specifically, I've used a sort of water wavy shape generation tool
Oh
known as
right,
Terragen, which is part of the Arceon plugin, Archeon, I don't know, World Edit add-on created by Arcaniax. It's a
right.
great tool, a great tool that allows you to sort of generate a bunch of weird and wacky terrain on the go. But I have done similar work in the past, creating little mounds with voxel sniper, smoothing those out, and then sort of bridging some smooth wavy lines in between.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of hard to explain, I think, without properly seeing the technique. So maybe we'll
Yeah,
take
well,
time to go over something like that soon
yeah,
enough.
definitely. We'll get onto a blank plot at the end of the episode, and you can give us a bit of a demo. That would be great. Yeah. Um, just before we do that, I think we've seen quite a lot of the plot. I've been flying around manically whilst we've been talking. I did have a couple of other questions.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with builder's block? You know, those moments where you suddenly go, "Oh, I've just finished a project, and I just don't know what to do next."
Yeah. I feel like I'm not the best example of taking care of builder's block, considering I haven't built in months personally. But I think it's important to remember that you don't really have to be building all the time. And if you're feeling like you're under that pressure and that you have to build even when you're not enjoying it, I think that's when it's important to sort of take a step back and maybe at least try not to work on something so big. Take some time to work on some of the fundamentals again.
Yeah.
Try and recreate some little details you see in other builds. Try and work on maybe your skills with smoothing with brushes or your use of color. I think that, along with taking the time to look at some more art and get some more ideas and some inspiration again, can really help to get you through that sort of that block.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and remembering that not only do you not have to be building all the time, but not every creation that you come up with has to be, a perfect piece of art, because
Well,
there
that is a
isn't.
relief. Yeah, great. So why don't we jump on to that blank plot we were talking about, and you can start showing us a few of these techniques, because alongside the water here that I asked about, I'm also curious as to how you create these backdrops, these walls as well, and some of this that you were talking about shaping and then texturing and stuff like that. So let's jump over and we'll see what you can show us.
Sure, no worries.
So here we are on Uncomfortable's blank plot. As you can see, there is nothing magical here yet. But Uncomfortable, you've volunteered to show us a little bit of your technique, how you do things, and how you achieve some of your particular styles on your plots. So over to you. You're in charge.
All right. So I think the first thing I sort of want to look at is the techniques I use to create some of the smooth shapes that I go with. And I think I'll start with making a basic sort of tail, which will run from base, sort of thinning out towards the end, with some curls along the way to give some more dynamic, moving shapes.
Great.
So I'm going to start with size 15 voxel. There we go. We'll move on to size 20. Oh, hang on, I'm lagging a lot. There we go. This bit might take a bit of editing. I'll be honest with you.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. You just work away, and we will watch.
Yeah. All right. So I started with a size 20 voxel ball brush, and the first thing I generally do is just sort of map out the general flow of the shape that I'm working on. So I'll start with slowly decrementing the size of the brush that I'm using to create smaller and smaller spheres that as it goes along, and I'll carefully place these spheres to create a sort of curving, twisting, snaky type shape.
Yeah, yeah. Now, are you using all stone there? Because the lighting is awful.
Oh, it is? You might have turned on night vision then.
Yeah, I think I will. Let's do that.
Aren't very important. Yeah.
There we go. Got you. Yeah, carry on. That's much better.
Yeah, I have mine on by just like by default. So
yeah.
I'm sort of used to not seeing the shadows. My mistake. I should have mentioned
No,
that.
no, it's all good. On some plots, I think actually it's important not to have night vision on. Certainly, I think it might have been one of your plots actually, where we had the clouds with rain coming down, and the whole underbelly of the clouds was darker, and it gave it so much more weight. So yeah.
Look, I'll be honest with you, that was accidental, but I'm really glad that it worked out as a bit of a happy accident. So I sort of kept it in there.
Anyway, enough of my rabbiting. Carry on.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty important to take your time in developing whatever sort of shape you want to work with. So don't rush through. I always take a few minutes, and I'm going a bit rough at the moment because we don't want to be here for about 5 hours. But that's the sort of shape that we'll go with, and we'll work on smoothing that down and making it a bit more natural.
Yeah.
Because we need to put the organic in the word organic.
Yeah, I mean, I've said enough times on the creative focus, looking at other people's plots, the worst thing in terms of breaking the illusion is noticing a voxel, noticing a block or a sphere, and you know fine rightly that's just a brush that's not been touched since it got put down.
Yep, and then I'm a bit ashamed to say there are a few in my plots, especially the Cloud Beast one, but I won't point them out. I'll leave that for anyone to sort of.
Well, I mean, if I didn't see them, you got away with it.
Don't worry, they'll blare at you next time you visit. Anyway,
I will be looking. Sorry, go on.
Now that we've sort of got this general shape down, I want to work on blending these ball shapes together to more cohesive, singular shape. So what I've got here is the Voxel Sniper lift brush, so it's BE lift, on size 4 we'll go with, and just sort of placing some blocks in the gaps that are created between these sphere shapes. Just slightly, just doesn't matter if it's a bit messy looking for now, because we're going to run over it with a smoothing brush after. Oops. So just filling in these gaps. Because at the moment, if we start smoothing this, they're still going to look like separate shapes, and it's going to look a bit lumpy in places.
Right.
Whereas this gives us something to work with and create some more blocks to be smoothed around.
Yes, I suppose that's the thing of using voxels, isn't it? If you're trying to smooth an already mathematically smooth object, it's not going to do much, is it?
Yeah, so it just sort of roughs it up a bit and give you something more to work with. And just as I mentioned, sort of taking your time with creating the initial shape, I think it's sort of worth saying, don't rush any of the parts really, because it's a slow process. But if you do take your time to add that little bit of attention to detail, or get your beginning of your work set up properly, it's going to really pay off in the end. One thing that I find important to builds, at least for me, is sort of creating an atmosphere around yourself as you're working with music. Personally,
Nice.
it really does it for me. Is if I can find something that really gets me in the groove and gets my brain working, and maybe even matches the mood of what I'm trying to build, it really helps me put me in that mindset to build the right thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice. Yeah, we can
So,
definitely see now it much more looks like one solid object rather than a bunch of linked objects. So yeah, great. What next?
Yeah. So next we'll sort of go through to smooth it all, really. So I'm going to be running over it with the voxel sniper again, a blendable brush. So it's not going to be massive. It's going to be about a 5 or 6 size brush. Because the higher you go, the more it starts to blend things together a bit too much, and it gets a bit abrasive.
Yeah. So what brush was that again?
That was the blend ball brush.
Blend ball brush. Yeah.
BBB.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow, that makes a massive difference very quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this is one of the more delicate parts. The first 2 parts, getting a general shape. It's important to get a general shape originally, and then it's also important to fill in those gaps. But this is really where the detail starts coming out. So I'm going through here, and any sort of lumpy parts, any bits that stick out just a little bit too much, I'm running over and just lightly 1 or 2 clicks.
Yeah.
And this is sort of where it's important to get some knowledge of how a natural curve looks when you're dealing with blocks like this.
I'm genuinely impressed with how quickly that went from quite a rugged, lumpy object to something that really had quite elegant curves appearing.
Yeah, it's something that takes a bit of work to work out what degree and what angle each curve and each turn should be on. But yeah, it starts to come together really fast when you actually get to this part. I think people overestimate the amount of I don't know. I'm not quite sure where I was going with that. But
but I mean, I assume that you've got much quicker and more fluid at this as you've spent time doing this. I'm sure you weren't this efficient to begin with.
No, not at all. I originally actually put my first ones by hand, and it was
wow.
It was hell.
Yeah, I tried to build a couple of organics by hand, and that was when I decided I wasn't an organic builder, I'll be honest.
Well, I think that's the thing, is that it's not as inaccessible as people sort of seem to think. It's entirely possible to start just jumping into it and learning. I think it's a great skill to develop just as a sort of art, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, hopefully with these little pointers, it might give people that push and that little bit of boldness to have a go at some of the techniques that you're showing us.
Yeah, and I think people tend to jump sort of into creating full humanoid shapes or full lifelike recreations of existing creatures and such, which is good. It's good to sort of want to be able to do that, but it's difficult to jump in on something so full on, like head first at first.
Yeah.
Which is why I think shapes like this, just sort of smooth, wispy tail shapes, and things like lizards are, I think, great starting point for developing skills, because they're all pretty rounded. They're all pretty simple shapes.
A little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, again, another thing that I've mentioned previously is that trying to do particularly, as you say, a humanoid shape, we are so trained mentally to be able to recognize a face, the proportions of a body, that any slight error sticks out an absolute mile. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from in terms of recommending maybe slightly more unfamiliar shapes, I suppose, things that don't have a definite that's right or that's wrong to them. Yeah,
and that's what I think the beauty of working with within the sort of fantasy realm is that really it's up to you what you build. It's there's no strict guidelines and there's no strict requirements of oh you need to make this look like this. This has to look like this. It's all pretty out there. It's all up to you. And I think that's important to remember in general with building is that there's no set rules. There's no set guidelines. There's tips and there's suggestions on how you should be approaching things. Like, oh, you should use this brush for this thing, and ideally you should be using this shape for this part. But at the end of the day, it's all flexible and it's all, as I mentioned, an expression of art.
Absolutely,
And,
yeah. I mean, art's the perfect word. Really, it's understanding that you need to know the rules to know how to break them, isn't it? That's the
yeah.
And
yeah, everyone has their own idea of what art is and isn't. So
great.
It's important to remember that. That doesn't mean completely ignore all criticism and do what you want. I mean, you're free to do that. But
so it looks like
suggestion.
Yeah, definitely. So it looks like we've got a decent shape appearing here now. So where to next?
Where to next? Good question. All right. So generally, I separate something like this, like a tail, into two parts. So there's the sort of top skin, which will take up the top half of everything, and there's the sort of underbelly of everything, which I will go for two different colors for. Generally, me personally, I'll go for a more bold color on top, like the blues and pinks of the Cloud Beast one, and a lighter or more toned down, relaxed color underneath. A bit more muted to make the rest of it stand out.
Yes, I suppose that it makes sense to do lighter or bolder colours on top and then have sort of a darker underbelly. I suppose there's the idea of that being visually often the darker part of an object if it's being lit naturally anyway. So I suppose choosing those colours just helps to the brain to understand the shape in space, I suppose.
All right, so I think I've chosen. Yeah, so I'm going to be sort of doing a similar thing as what I did with the Cloud Beast one, which is going for a blue top and a bit of a light brown underbelly. I might go for some of the mushroom colors. I think those are great for a contrast. So I'm going for a size 10 brush, just to sort of, it's not too big and lets me move around without wrapping this color all the way around the shape.
Yeah.
So you can be a bit rough with how you apply this, because we're going to go over the edges eventually and do some more fine detailing with a smaller brush. So you can see this is sort of a bit messy.
Yeah, I've seen messy. That's not the messiest thing I've ever seen on Minecraft.
Messier than it will be. Hopefully.
Yeah, I'll take that. That sounds reasonable.
So most of that was just sort of running, sort of moving, slightly moving the mouse, but tracing a line as I'm holding down the brush along the middle of the shape. So it's starting to look a bit more like a creature now than it was before.
Yeah. Yes, it's amazing how much a little hint of colour suddenly transforms something from a shape into something that could be alive, a tentacle almost.
Okay, so now that I've got that sort of general shape, I'm going to go through with a smaller brush. I'm going through with a size 3 here and filling in any sort of gaps in the colouring, any rough parts. Just finely, slowly running along the edge there. Fill it in. All right, I think that's a fairly close color to what I was envisioning.
Yeah, great. So what next?
So I'm going to do the underside. Which block I am looking for. So it's good to run through sort of a few different ideas of what colors you want to go with. You don't have to go the first thing you go for. It's good to take a step back and consider, hey, that's not working the way I want it to work. I'm gonna
Hmm.
go with and try some wood. See how that looks.
I think that's an interesting point of learning when you're tackling this kind of creative building in Minecraft is learning the color and tone of blocks as
Yeah,
simply a color and tone rather than this is an object, this is wood, this is stone. Like when you start to build creatively like this, you can no longer think of them as that. You have to think of them simply as blocks of color and texture, don't you? Which I have, admittedly, I found that quite challenging. I struggle to stop thinking of wood as wood.
yeah. Sorry, that's I was hoping to touch on that. I completely forgot about it. Thank you. Um, yeah, it's really important to sort of, especially when you're working with organics like this. It's that block choice. It doesn't matter except for the color, in my opinion,
Hmm.
and the texture. If you're going that sort of extra level, um, yeah, it's difficult to get in that different mindset and start thinking about the game differently. But it can really help elevate you and make it a bit easier, make you a bit more comfortable with building.
Yeah, there's nothing I like more than, whether in creative or in survival, finding someone building something and using a completely unexpected block choice that it suddenly makes you go, oh wow, I never thought of that. That's amazing.
Yeah. I still see stuff all the time that I think, wow, I never would have thought of using that. One that I see used a bit more frequently now is melons for a lot of plant plant life, which they're melons. It makes sense, but it's not something that I
Yeah,
thought of in that context.
yeah, it's amazing. I mean, people think of Minecraft visually, I suppose, as quite simple, but I suppose particularly now that the amount of different blocks is growing exponentially as Mojang keeps developing this, the amount of possibilities are becoming quite staggering. It's the Rubik's cube of voxel art.
That's for sure. So what I'm going to do here is working with some commands to create some sort of more texture or textured coloring on this blue I've got here.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is work with the simplex mask. I'll send that in chat real quick. It's really useful for creating some more variation in your coloring, rather
Okay.
than just running over and doing random splotches of colors
Yeah.
with a sphere brush,
Yeah,
which I'm
again,
not a
not
fan of.
wanting to make it look like a voxel. Yeah.
Yep. So a lot of people do things like just randomly dispersing um, random blocks and little staticky thing, and I'm not a fan of that.
Hmm.
Like just replacing everything with a random selection of colors, I think can look really messy. Whereas if you use something like simplex, like I've just sent, or some other tools which I might get into,
Yeah,
can
we'll
really make it look a bit more organized.
great. Yeah, we'll link them in the description as well if people want to see the detail of that.
Yeah. So what I've got here is I've got simplex on size 50 with both cyan concrete and light blue concrete, and I'm going to overlay that on the cyan concrete I've already got in here. So we'll see that.
Oh
There
wow.
we go. It's a drastic change.
Yeah,
Um,
amazing.
it's added a more uniform pattern on it. Really makes it look a little bit more natural.
So am I right in thinking then that works a little bit like using a brush in Photoshop? Then it has a sort of a preset pattern that it uses to overlay the texture, the different blocks.
Yeah, I think more or less. So there's a parameter for sort of the size of the splotches of the first color. So we've got these darker cyan bits.
Yeah.
It's at size 10, and then it just fills out the space around them with the other selection you've got,
Mhm.
essentially. Sort of
Fantastic.
hard to explain unless you really see it in action, like you've got here. It takes some experimentation,
Yeah.
personally, to get used to. But I've got that, and I've set a mask on the cyan concrete so that it would only replace the cyan concrete with this pattern. If
Brilliant.
that makes
Yeah.
if that makes any sense, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this next brush we're using is the splatter brush in World Edit. It lets you sort of lay down some non-uniform splats of color on a surface. So what I've got here is some pink concrete, which I'm going to be putting little blobs of everywhere to sort of add some more color into it, like I have with
yeah.
the cloud beast.
Okay, so two different plugins, commands that achieve a similar effect, only just slightly at a different scale.
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Nice. It's great
So
to have
this is
those different techniques to do similar jobs. I suppose it also creates that variety, because obviously different commands are going to do slightly, ever so slightly different things that will make it feel less repetitive or predictable.
Yeah, and that's what you want, especially when it's an organic thing. It's not super uniform and it's not super repetitive and straight. It flows. It's to go with the name of it. It's organic. It's more natural. All right. So the next thing I'll sort of be working with is Terragen to create some sort of flowing, strange terrain underneath this weird tentacly shape.
Yes, fantastic. I definitely want to know how to do that.
Yeah. So first thing I'm going to do is set a global mask, a G mask of 0, so that it only replaces blocks of air, because I don't want to create terrain or water that cuts off the end of this tail or removes the end of this tentacle. All right, so this is using the Terragen plugin. It's honestly it's just created it then and there. It's created some wavy shapes underneath this.
Amazing. And
So I've
was
used
that just like one or two commands, or I mean?
that was just one command there.
Really?
I've used
Wow.
the electric template there, and I've chosen sort of some light blue glass to go underneath. Because what I want to make clear is that with my philosophy in building, it's that it's the end product that matters, and the techniques you use to get there aren't so important. In my opinion, as long as you're happy with what you're creating in the end, and you think that you have definitely gotten something out of it creatively, you're free to use whatever commands you want. If people think that what you're doing is sort of cheating or a bit cheap, I think that it's important to remember that it's just art. It's just fun at the end of the day. If you're comfortable using commands quite heavily, then by all means go for it. But if you're a person that is against that wants to build by hand, also by all means go for it.
Absolutely, and I think that parallel with art is the perfect one. Every artist has their principles and their techniques and what they think is and isn't art, and it's all subjective and personal, and I think you have to make your own rules at the end of the day. I think you're quite right there. There is no universal right and wrong. It's only what you as the artist are happy with.
I think plugins and tools like this really help to make things a lot more accessible for builders, which is what we need right now. I think that it's great to see so many more people building and using their creative skills to their full abilities. It's
great. So is there anything else that you would do to that once you've run that command, or would that be a once and done job? You pick the command you want, and if it looks right, there we go, done.
I generally take a few passes over it, sort of see, well, what can I do with the color to make this a bit more interesting? You'll see I have added a few more sort of slightly darker pink, purple, within the pink that I've got there, just to give it some more variation as well. So things like that, going through and changing up some small areas of color to make some areas pop a bit more than others. Things like I might go through and do some detailing work, like some vines, some little mushrooms going on it, or little horns, spines, things like that.
Great.
Which are all their own little techniques of doing, and a lot of that is a small, intricate handwork. But yeah, it depends. It depends on each of the builds. And I'll just sort of try a few different things. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We'll just go back and delete it and try something else.
Yeah, great. So before we finish the episode, then, was there anything else that you wanted to show us? So before we finish the episode for today, then, was there anything else that you wanted to show us?
In terms of building, I think I'd be pretty happy just sort of demonstrating, what I've demonstrated there. There's definitely a lot more to go into, but I
Yeah.
think that might be something for a larger project later, maybe.
Yeah,
But
definitely. I mean, that's plenty for people to be having a go at, experimenting with. Hopefully, that'll help them get their builds up to that next level. So,
yeah,
yeah, before we finish the episode, I had one last question for you, for our viewers, and that is, what one piece of advice would you give to a builder who's looking to improve their creative building skills?
I guess it's not so much of one single thing. It's more of a a concept of just don't stress too much about what you're creating. The idea is to be creative and create art, whatever you call that. Just try things out, experiment. You don't have to make things that everyone else is making. Try out some different things, use weird colors, make weird shapes, throw weird tools at the wall until you like something that you've made. And yeah, just go for it
Yeah,
with an open mind.
fantastic.
Because nobody becomes, a outstanding world champion at building just by building the same thing that everyone else is building, which is totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, experiment
Yeah.
is I guess what I'm getting at.
Fantastic advice. Yeah, totally agree. Uncomfortable. I think we're going to leave it there for that episode. I think we've got plenty to take away there. Thanks so much for coming along and giving us your wisdom and a little bit of your time. So, yeah, thanks very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I hope that I was able to give something to someone out there.
Absolutely, definitely. So, viewers, that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Hopefully, we'll get more interviews like this. And if you really enjoyed it and you want more, let me know in the comments below. So, for today's episode, see you again.